Okay. Okay, I think we can start. Hi, everybody. My name is Nevzat Çelik, and I am Director of Paris Advanced Research Center. Today, we are honored to host Mr. Kerem Alkin. He's the ambassador and permanent representative of Turkey to the OECD. We are going to discuss global economic growth in the shadow of geopolitical risk and the banking system concern. Mr. Alkin, to begin our discussion, I am honored to have you today, and thank you for accepting our invitation. Could you please provide an overview, the role and operational approach of the OECD before we go into our main discussion topic?
Absolutely. First of all, we have to know that we are talking about maybe a very interesting construction network of a global economic political system from the end of the Second World War. So the first international organization was and is the United Nations. We are talking about October 1945. And then after United Nations, we see in Washington, D.C., United Nations in New York, but International Monetary Fund and World Bank, International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, in Washington, D.C. And then in 1947, there is a very interesting visit of Foreign Secretary, U.S. Foreign Secretary George Marshall to Harvard University to do a special talk about the future of the world diplomacy. And in this speech, there was a very interesting announcement of George Marshall, the State Secretary, that U.S. is ready for the reconstruction of the Europe after the Second World War.
I see.
1 year after this speech, we see Marshall Plan, and with Marshall Plan, U.S. decided to create a special organization for the management of this Marshall Plan for 17 European countries. In this moment, for these 17 European countries, they decided to create a special institution, which the name is European Economic Development Corporation. And then this OEEC in 1948 was established for the management and fairly distribution of the Marshall Plan between 17 European countries, including mostly the Western European countries, and also Greece and Turkey.
Because they were also part of the NATO, or no?
No, it's just before. This is before the NATO, because NATO is 1949, 1 year after, and Turkey became the member of the NATO in 1953. I'm talking about before the NATO. The reason is so clear. In 1946, Soviet Union military troops, they entered to Iran, and they invaded approximately half of Iran, maybe 100 kilometers north to Tehran, the capital, they totally invaded Iran, and this military troops of Soviet Union, they came on the border of Turkey and Iraq.
I see.
And there was a very critical threat from Soviet Union to continue to invade perhaps Turkey and Iraq. In this moment, the United Nations is a very fresh, very beginning, at the beginning as an international organization. So the United Nations General Assembly, they did an extraordinary, unexpected meeting. And in this extraordinary meeting, they decided to call Soviet Union to take out all the military troops from Iran. But everybody understood that there will be some maybe some expectations and targets of Soviet Union to be in the hot sea like Mediterranean. So that's why United States administration on the civil side and also on the military side, they discuss many times what we have to do to protect Turkey and Greece as soon as possible. So this is so critical. At the 11th of March 1947, after this invasion of Soviet Union to Iran, 1 year after, International Monetary Fund in 11th of March 1947, they decided to accept Turkey the membership of International Monetary Fund. Okay. This is a very critical decision because this is, in one side, the announcement of Turkey to see Turkey on the Atlantic Alliance. It is so important. Why this date is so important, 11th of March 1947? Because the next day, 12th of March 1947, President Truman visits US Congress, and US Congress, for the first time, President Truman did his declaration about the project of United States to protect the free world.
I see.
And in the international policy, we know this declaration, Truman Doctrine. Yeah. So one day before the declaration of the Truman Doctrine, Turkey accepted to International Monetary Fund, to the Western Alliance economic politics system. And the second day, there was the declaration and the announcement of the Truman Doctrine. And after this declaration, just 1 year before the Marshall Plan, US Congress decided a very special law to protect Turkey and Greece for the military and economic side by the law number 75. With this law, US began immediately all kind of military support and economic support to Turkey and Greece. This is just before the announcement of the Marshall Plan, 1 year before.
Interesting.
After this law, 1 month after, as I say few minutes ago, George Marshall, the State Secretary, which means Foreign Minister of US, he visited Harvard University to talk with the students. And in this speech, in this very important speech presentation, he declared that US is ready to create a special recovery plan for all Europe. And then 1 year after, they announced Marshall Plan, and Turkey and Greece find themselves inside of the Marshall Plan. From 1948 to 1960, like a 12 years, the Marshall Plan continued. In which building? In in the Chateau building of OECD, because OECD campus, in OECD campus, there is a chateau, everybody knows. This is a gift of the Rothschild family to the OECD. It was a hunting chateau before, because everybody knows Paris in La Porte de la Muette, and near to the Porte de la Dauphine, we have the big forest, Bois de Boulogne. Bois de Boulogne at the 19th century came to the 16th arrondissement.
Okay.
So that's why this big forest was also one of the most interesting hunting place of the aristocratical people, and also very rich people. So that's why the Rothschild family have a hunting house, a very beautiful chateau in the middle of this place. But today, this chateau is in the middle of houses, condominiums, residence. It's so normal, and it's near to the periphery. So they give this chateau as a gift for the first technical center or operational center of OECD. So in 1961, OECD began with this building, and they decided to construct two more buildings. One of the building is we call with the name of the rue, the road. The second building we called Marshall Building because of the Marshall Plan.
Of course.
So two buildings like that, one chateau, and the beginning of the 2000, OECD say that, hey, from 1961 to today, in the last maybe 40 years, we did all organizations, all international summits, everything in the hotels in Paris. Why we do like that? So asking a very strong financial support from the member countries, they decided to construct the new conference hall of the OECD. Now, every day we use this conference hall from underground to the ground floor. And Chateau, the new conference hall, one building, and Marshall Building. So we use every day, every part of the OECD as a very detailed campus, very sophisticated campus. From 1961 to today, OECD become the most important think tank center of the Western Alliance, and also the countries who would like to be together for common global values like human rights, human rights, freedom,
all democratic principles.
Rules of law, any kind of democratical rules, as you say. So with this global shared values, OECD become the most important think tank of the countries who would like to be together under this global shared values. So Turkiye, from the beginning, is the part of this OECD, and from 1961 to today, Turkiye never stopped to give all his support for all kind of global, all kind of support to the global shared values with the other countries. Now, by the membership of the Costa Rica last year in 2022, now we are together like 38 countries.
38, okay.
38 countries with Costa Rica. In the Asia side, we have Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. On the Latin America side, as a member, we have, Mexico, Chile, Costa Rica, and Colombia, another 4 countries. And in the Middle East, from Middle East, we have, as a member, Israel. And with Turkiye, most of the countries are the European countries, European Union countries. And at that moment, we have also 6 candidate countries to be the membership for the next 5 years. 3 from Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, and Peru. 3 from European side, the countries who are already the member of the European Union, Bulgaria, Romania, and Croatia. So I would like to say that OECD until 2000 was one of the most important data provider, economical, technical, statistical data provider of the very sophisticated countries, for the member countries and non-member countries. But after, and also one of the most important international organization as a think tank, to provide very strongly some policy decisions for different kind of sectors and topics for the member countries, from education to digitalization, from energy transition to international transportation, from fiscal policy to money policy. Any kind of topics and subject is the content of the OECD technical works, with 3,800 professional staff. In the beginning of the 2000s, the number of staff was only 1,700, but with the former General Secretary Mexican Angel Gurria, OECD would like to be a more stronger global actor on the think tank side. So that's why they continue to hire more professional staff. So that's why in the last 22 years, the OECD's professional staff number came from 1,700 to 3,800. It's a big increase on the professional staff. So that's why in this moment, one of the most important discussion issue on the OECD side is the budget, is a sustainable budget, because with 3,800 staff, professional staff, one of the most challenging issue is creating a sustainable budget for OECD, because of this big number of professional staff. OECD spent 85% of his budget for paying the salaries and the other issues for the professional staff. So unfortunately, only 15% is using for the infrastructure investment of OECD, a new website, the digitalization of the OECD. So that's why, for example, the website of OECD was not enough user-friendly website until 2 years. Now there is a big work to create the OECD's website, and also all digital infrastructure, also data provider infrastructure, to be more user-friendly for the people who would like to look, who would like to who would like to research all kind of documents, all kind of data of OECD. And I would like to say that OECD's data providing mission is one of the most important mission in all his mission.
Well, thank you so much for giving amazing brief of OECD. I really learned a lot of things that I was thinking the OECD, to be honestly, just focused economic development. But as we explained, it's really more than just economic development. Thank you for your amazing.
Maybe one phrase I would like to add from 1961 to today. I would like to say that Russian-Ukrainian war. Unfortunately, the Russians unprovoked, war to unprovoked and injustice war against Ukraine. For that subject, I would like to say that now OECD is in a position the most politicized of his history. The reason is so clear. In this moment, in United Nations General Assembly, in United Nations Security Council, in World Trade Organization, in every international multilateral multinational institutions, there is no chance to take some clear decisions, maybe to stop this war. Because of Russians and Chinese, maybe some countries who continue to discuss with other countries about this war. But OECD is a very different kind of institution, a different kind of international organization with some countries, some membership countries who would like to be under the global shared values. 38 countries. So that's why in this moment, for these 38 countries, OECD is the best place to take too many decisions, maybe to support Ukraine for this war. So that's why OECD find himself in the middle of very global politicized position. So that's why, in one hand, we are talking about the future of the clean energy transition. In one side, the future of the digitalization, the future of the labor markets, the future of the global economy, the future of the global trade. But at the same time, we are also talking about how the world can find the way to finalize this war as soon as possible, and how the world can find the way to recover Ukraine. So that's why at that moment, OECD is working for also the most important topics of the world, like climate change, climate crisis, energy supply crisis, food supply crisis, and other topics, which I said a few seconds ago, but also at the same time, the amazing effects, unfortunately, the negative effects, the major effects and the minor effects of this war.
Well, yeah, it's clear, and thank you for your details. I would like to go from this point, the geopolitical risk, to our main topic. And I have been reading your articles, and as our listener might not know some of them, I would recommend them to read your articles in Sabah Daily. And I was really fascinated, and I learned a lot of things about economical development and geopolitical risk. From this point, I would like to ask you, what was the expected global economic growth rate for 2022 before as you mentioned, the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war, which created a geopolitical risk, not only for Europe, but also for global economy? And what is also predicted growth for the world economy 2023?
First of all, I would like to congratulate, I would like to applaud the OECD economists, the OECD Economic Research Department, because if we could look all the international economic institutions outlook reports, economic outlook reports, global economic outlook reports, I could say that OECD economists, they are so successful. They are so success for the estimation of the global economy. Before seeing the Russian-Ukrainian war, it's so normal that at the end of the 2021, beginning of the 2022, before the war, the expectation of the OECD for the global growth rate, it was 4.5%.
4.5.
Yeah, 4.5%. But after the war, we saw any kind of negative effects of this war with energy supply crisis, food supply crisis, and incredible increasing of the of the energy prices, food prices, and also a very critical global inflation problem still continuing. Especially there is a sticky core inflation problem at that moment for the G7 countries and OECD countries. So for the main inflation, the main inflation is began to coming down, but unfortunately there is a big problem on the core inflation. So OECD continue to work how we can do for this core inflation problem too. So for these reasons, at the beginning of the war, OECD economic department, economic research department, they had to decrease the growth rate estimation from 4.5% to 2.8% for 2022. But after maybe just after the end of the summer in 2022, when they will begin to see the big efforts of the OECD member countries like Turkiye and some of the countries, very big success on the growth rates, even there is a Russian-Ukrainian war. So they re-estimate the 2022 growth rate. So from 2.6 to 2.8% for the last report, they decided to increase the estimation of the 2022 to 3.3% for 2022. But unfortunately, because of this core inflation problem, and to fight against the core inflation problem, there is an expectation that Federal Reserve, U.S. Central Bank, Federal Reserve, and European Central Bank they have to continue to increase perhaps the rates, and also maybe there will be a very important tightening the money policy decisions. So that's why for the 2023 OECD staff, OECD economic staff, they estimate for this year the global growth rate for 2.6%, and for 2024 2.9%. So it means that under the OECD for 2023 and 2024, we will continue to discuss a fragile recovery for the global economy.
And I would just to add another information, and I would like to also hear you from you what you think about it. In January, I made a little bit research. The World Bank warned the global economy, and it's indicated there is a risk close to falling into recession. And
Yes.
do you think is there a recession coming in 2023?
It was a interesting joke in the last meeting of the OECD's new approaches to the economic challenges meeting, NAEC. The guest of this NAEC meeting was European Central Bank Governor Christine Lagarde, and she was also the chairman, the governor, the high governor of the International Monetary Fund too.
Before becoming the central bank,
before being the ECB governor, you are absolutely right. So there was a very interesting joke between the economic staff of the OECD and her, that the estimations of the OECD is always better than IMF and World Bank. But it was just like a joke conversation. But in the reality, there is also a reality on this joke, because if we compare the IMF and World Bank estimations and OECD estimations, I would like to say that on the growth side, the estimations, the expectations of the OECD are always much real or much successful than the other institutions. So that's why OECD high economy staff, they say that on our side, we don't wait any kind of recession for the global economy, because most of the countries, they already finalize all kind of decision for the COVID-19. So there is no decision of quarantine or any kind of decisions for COVID-19. So all is already finished. So that's why there will be a very strong continuing recovery of the international service industry in the world, like tourism, hospitality, transportation, logistics, and everything. So that's why, especially because of the very strong recovery of the service industry in the world, and also maybe a redesigning of the global supply chain. So that's why some of the countries' role in the global supply chain will increase, like Turkiye. I would like to share one example. The last March, Turkey's monthly export volume was $23.4 billion in 1 month, and it's another Turkish Republican monthly new export record
for 2023.
For 2023, so it's a new record. It is the most highest monthly high volume of export for all Turkish Republic. So for 100 years.
Very interesting.
So because after COVID-19 pandemic and also Russian-Ukrainian war, these are two black swan, two big risks that all the world, there wasn't any expectation such a kind of global pandemic, and also a war in the middle of Europe,
and also the earthquake. I mean,
absolutely. In the Turkey side, unfortunately, we had also the big problem of earthquake for 2023. So because of this two global unexpected risk, the pandemic, global pandemic, and Russian-Ukrainian war. So I would like to say that because of this two critical issue, there is an interesting redesigning of the global supply chain. So we discuss under the OECD and all international institutions two very important subject. One is reshoring. The second is nearshoring. Means that European Union, so they now rethink how we can minimize our expectation about supply chain from Asia, especially from China. So if we are looking all kind of countries near to the Europe, some neighbor countries, Turkiye is one of the most strongest production country about manufacturing. So that's why in last year, in 2022, our yearly export volume recovered $254 billion for the first time in the Turkish Republic time. It is the highest one. And also we continue to see some new recorded new export volumes monthly. So it means that maybe the searching of the European companies for reshoring and nearshoring will continue, and maybe this will affect on the positive side for Turkey and some neighbor countries to have more import volume between European Union and this country. So for this reason, maybe some of the countries will continue to be a strong manufacturing production countries in 2023. So that's why OECD for two subjects. First, the very strong recovery of the service industry in the world economy, and second, some of the countries' best production performance because of the redesigning of the global supply chain. For these reasons, there is no recession expectation on the OECD side if we compare to IMF or World Bank.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. And I also, as we live in Paris or also Turkey and all around the world, we have the inflation problem.
Yes.
This recovery will help down the inflation?
I think we will continue to have problems on the inflation side 2 years more.
I see.
So we discuss also under OECD, we discuss this issue also. First problem is strong recovery of the service industry. Never forget, for 2020, 2021, international service industry, they lose big money. Tourism, hotels, restaurants, cafes, hospitality industry, logistics, transportation. Just remember, they lose big money. So if there is a strong recovery of the international service industry, which began from the second half of 2022, will continue this strong recovery, I think, and OECD think, for 2023, 2024, I'm absolutely sure that we will see the inflation effect of this strong recovery. Just looking at the hotel prices in Paris.
That's
normally,
true.
Before the COVID, just remember on the normal time for the international service industry, in Paris, it was so easy to find 150 euro, 200 euro, maximum 250 euro, good hotels. Is it true?
That's true, yeah.
Yes. Now, too many delegations from all member countries, they came to Paris for OECD meetings from our country too, from our capital too. We have big problems to find good hotel less than 300 euros.
That's true.
Most of the hotel prices is 350 euros, 400 euros, 500 euros. So suddenly the strong recovery of the service industry in the world, we see an amazing inflation effect on the pricing of the services in all world. So it means that if this service industry recovery will continue, it means that the core inflation struggling will continue. Even Federal Reserve and European Central Bank, they will continue to tightening the money policy, to continue to increase the policy rates. I think for these reasons, the core inflation problem will continue until the end of the 2024. And then there is a limit for Federal Reserve and European Central Bank to continue to increase the rates. The reason is so clear, because some of the banks in the European side and also in US side, they have little bit problematic balance sheets between asset and liabilities. After the Federal Reserve, a very strong money policy rates increasing decisions, we saw some bankruptcy in the banking system. 3 banks, I remember one name is the Silicon Valley Bank, and yes, 2 other more. So we began to see some bankruptcies on the banking system, and also Credit Suisse. Hopefully, the Switzerland banking system, the recovery in very quickly, the Credit Suisse issue by the announcement of United Bank of Switzerland, UBS. In US side, the public authority, they did big efforts to recover the problem very quickly. It's okay, but on the future, if Federal Reserve and European Central Bank, they had to continue to increase the rates, it will mean that there will be big financial problem because of the treasuries on the banking balance sheet, banking system balance sheet. So that's why even there will be a core inflation problem, I think that there will be a limit for Federal Reserve and European Central Bank to increase the rates. So that's why maybe in 3 or 4 months, they have to stop to continue to increase the rates. So that's why I think the core inflation problem, the struggling core inflation problem, will continue on my side, a little bit on the OECD side. Perhaps I could say that maybe this is mostly my idea, a little bit OECD estimation. We will continue to see a quite strong inflation problem until 2024. I'm not talking about 2-digit inflation rates for the G7 countries. 2-digit rates is mostly our problem, developing countries' problem. But compared to some years ago, very acceptable inflation rates like between 0.5 to 2% yearly for the G7 countries, we will continue to talk a little bit 4%, 5%, maybe inflation rates for the G7 countries. And we have to understand that there was a 10% of inflation shock in 2022 in the G7 countries, but at the same time, the nominal wage increasing decisions was only, unfortunately, 5.9%. So
that's what we see in our life, yeah.
So there is a big problem of real wage melting, and also purchasing power melting at that moment in the G7 countries too. I'm not talking about the developing countries because our problems are more deeper.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we see every day our life in France, and is one of the main reason we have seen strikes and protests in France since January. It was also the problem of the purchasing power of the
Yeah.
individual.
The discussion is not only the pension system
No.
form, but also, unfortunately, the melting problem, the melting problem of the purchasing power, because me and my wife, we live for 2 years in Paris, so we solved the inflation, the real inflation.
That's
in
true.
Paris. Maybe the France average inflation is not too high, but in Paris, it's just like twice.
In reality, it's quite different. That's true.
And also, maybe for some last words for this very very meaningful conversation between us. I hope our colleagues will find interesting and fruitful this conversation, this interview. But I would like to say that one of this very interesting discussion under OECD between us is also grid inflation.
What does it mean?
Grid inflation. It means that some of our colleagues, I'm calling this inflation effect gridflation, grid inflation, but also some of our colleagues, they say profit inflation. Means that after the 2 years of big effect of the global pandemic, most of the companies, most of the international global companies, and also domestic companies, if they find very strong demand for their goods, for their services, they increase the prices incredibly for taking a very strong profit. So there is a grid of profit for the companies, for the sectors, because of this grid, to have high profit performance expectation. Unfortunately, if we compare the cost increase of the companies and the profit expectation of the companies, most of the companies increase the prices of their products higher, maybe 2 times higher than the cost effect.
I see.
So that's why, for example, the production cost of the company, about energy prices, salaries, maybe raw materials, maybe increase 10, but they decided to increase the prices of the product 20, double. So that's why an amazing expectation of profit, a grid of profit, so that's why we are also in a very interesting effect of grid inflation, gridflation. We said gridflation. This is a big discussion at that moment between the very known academics too, like Nuria Rubini, Paul Krugman, Joseph Stiglitz. So in their articles, if our colleagues would like to look the discussions in the Cambridge University, Oxford University, in the US universities, if they would like to look the last articles about the inflation effect, they would like to see this gridflation effect also as a subject, as a topic.
Well, thank you for explaining. And so you have also mentioned about this would be my last question. And you mentioned about the bank crisis, what we have been heard from USA and also lately from the Credit Suisse. As you mentioned, it's the political leaders and international organizations, and especially federal Reserve and the Central Bank of Europe has more role to prevent this crisis. And as an economist, do you think that we can call the crisis of bank like 2008, or we will come over this problem what we have seen lately?
Hopefully, I would like to say that all major countries have very critical experiences, very critical lessons from 2008. So that's why I am absolutely sure that none of these countries, US, UK, European countries, Turkiye, none of these countries, none of these OECD countries will give a chance or how I can say will freeze against a banking crisis to do nothing, to not take any decisions. I'm absolutely sure that we are not on this level. We are not on this position because every country, unfortunately, paid a lot from 2008 financial crisis. So every country has very strong experience and lessons from 2008. So that's why I'm absolutely sure that and I see the countries, especially for the last experiences on US and in European side, they took the decisions so quickly. So the public authority, they are so ready. They are so ready to take all kind of decisions to protect the savings on the banking system. So I am absolutely sure that they will not give any chance for the increasing of the banking crisis. Never and ever. But I could say that increasing the money policy rate maybe will affect the private industry treasury auctions. I'm absolutely sure. I have a data for that. For example, I would like to share with you that in the last 2 years, after the increasing money policy rates of Federal Reserve and ECB, for example, the ratio of the maturing corporate bonds in developed economies is about 25%, and this ratio is over 50% in developing markets. So that's why in this moment, companies never ask more financial support by treasuries to do investment. So what could be a risk if there will be a negative effect on the investment side for the next 2 years? There could be a very fragile recovery, very low growth rates on the global side, but unfortunately, it will mean also a problem on the tax revenue. And if there will be a problem on the tax revenue or increasing of the tax revenue, it will mean that we will continue the increase of the budget deficit in United States and the European Union side too. That's the problem.
Well, thank you so much.
That's why for the Federal Reserve and European Central Bank, there is some limits to continue to tightening the money policy rate, because if you take these decisions overdose, and then because of this the growth rates coming down, and as you say, we see a very strong risk about recession. It will mean also a very big risk for the tax revenue, and also a big risk for the increasing of the budget deficit. And then with the higher money with the higher money policy rates, unfortunately, to balance the budget deficit, the public authority will continue to do treasury auctions much higher and much more expensive, and this is also a big risk. This means the continuing of the global debt vortex. So that's why this is just like a chain.
Yes.
All have a connection. So you for finding a solution to core inflation by using only money policy rates is not the solution, because you can continue to increase money policy rates, but it will mean less tax revenue, more budget deficit, more expensive borrowing, and also the continuing of the global debt vortex. So that's why in economy we have to know that all these compartments, they have a relationship.
So, as to summarize what you have been said, I see you are optimist coming for next 2 years about the global economy, but there is a conditions and there is a responsibilities for international organizations and also
absolutely, and also maybe it's not good for people like us, for the white collar shirt people or blue collar shirt people. People worked with salary. Unfortunately, we have to know how we could continue to live with higher inflation. That's the problem. But otherwise, if we will try to finalize the inflation problem as quicker as possible, unfortunately, this will mean a recession problem. Unfortunately, more unemployment. So that's why we are on the way of continue to accepting little bit higher inflation, but on the other side to protect employment and also little bit fragile recovery and little bit growth. Otherwise, there will be more problem, unfortunately.
Well, Mr. Alkin, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for explaining in the beginning about OECD as a representative of Turkey, and also giving us all about the political risk, about economic growth and banking risk system, and about also inflation. As an economist, I have really delighted, and thank you so much for really accepting us, and I think we will do another session because we are already 1 hour. Thank you so much. We have really learned a lot of things from you.
It's a pleasure to be together, and I am absolutely sure that the next 2 years will be a very interesting years. We will never forget. So maybe in the autumn we will do another one with the new topics, new fresh things.
Thank you. It will be great. Thank you. Have a good day and have a good weekend.
For you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.